Everyone, welcome back to How to Get Away with Plunder, where we teach you how to enrich yourself all while at the public's expense. So, I'm your host, Nanit.
And I'm Reed. Thanks for tuning in again.
So, in our last episode, we talked about the massive pork barrel scandal, right? And it definitely rocked the nation. And we also discussed how billions of pesos meant for development projects ended up in the pockets of politicians and their accomplices.
We covered the key players, senators like Tigoy Estrada, Bong Revilla, and the businesswoman and the mastermind, Janet Lim Napoles, and how the whole scheme worked through fake NGOs and ghost projects.
So today we're going to be diving into something that's even more frustrating than the last episode. And we're going to be looking about how these accused plunderers, people charged with stealing from the public, managed to get away scot-free. And I mean, no consequences yet.
Alam mo, I remember pala na nagkaroon ng million peso march out of this. So that's how
Yeah.
frustrated the people were talaga about this topic. So today's episode is bails, bribes, and besties. And trust us, the tactics are as infuriating as they are illuminating.
So we're breaking it down into 3 B's. You want to get started? Of course. Tara. So starting off with bail.
First things first, let's talk about bail. Now, under Philippine law, plunder is considered a heinous crime. If you're convicted, you're looking into life imprisonment.
And dahil sobrang seryoso nga ng plunder, it's supposed to be non-bailable. Ibig sabihin nun, kapag you are charged with plunder and it's proven that you are a plunderer, hindi ka na makakalabas ng kulungan. So that means there's no moving out, right?
Yun talaga yung operative word doon, di ba? Non-bailable offense siya. Supposed to be.
Oo. Pero, since there are high-profile, accused in plunder most of the time, they usually find ways to walk free. What are some examples?
Let's start with Junggoy Estrada, son of former President Joseph Estrada. In 2017, despite facing plunder charges in the pork barrel scandal or FIDAF scam, he was granted bail. The amount? 1.3 million pesos. Hindi ba nakaka-insulto yun?
Yeah, that's crazy. Dude, imagine that. That's parang, like, obviously people, sometimes they get caught stealing smaller amounts of money and they get jailed for way longer.
Diba? Tapos ito, alam mo yun, ang laki nung nakuhang pera, pero 1.3 lang yung
Oo, diba?
Imagine.
Kaloka. And then the next one, we have Sandigan Bayan 5th Division used what's called the Arroyo Doctrine. This is actually a precedent from Gloria Arroyo's plunder case to, rule that prosecutors don't have enough strong evidence that Estrada was the mastermind. This is actually how he got away with plunder, the Arroyo Doctrine. So, keep that little term in mind. Maybe we should put that in text.
So even though he was charged with plunder, the court said the evidence wasn't strong enough to keep him locked up. So, ano pa nga ba? Bail
Bail
granted.
Then there's Juan Ponce Enrile. In 2015, the Supreme Court allowed him to post bail for 1.4 million pesos on humanitarian grounds, citing his advanced age and ill health. Pero 'di ba, ang daming mga nakukulong na matatanda.
Diba?
Oh, siya lang ba yung nag-iisang matanda na nakulong?
Diba marami tayong nakikita na talagang uugod-ugod na
Oo.
at nagnakaw lang for example sa isang tindahan. Tas ganun, makukulong pa rin sila. Ito, ang laki-laki ng ninakaw pero mapapalaya based on humanitarian grounds.
Oo, 'di ba?
I mean,
Siya, ang kinuha niya supposedly pera. Yung mga iba, kinukuha lang nila pagkain.
diba?
Diba? So parang nakaka-frustrate din talaga, sobra.
And imagine, ang nakuha niya, 172.8 million pesos. So, di ba? Parang ang laking kaba ng bayan nung nakuha ng taong to. Tapos papalayain mo lang dahil matanda na siya.
Exactly. Honestly, it just gets more and more frustrating because now we're gonna be going into Major General Carlos Garcia. So his case is actually a little interesting. He was accused of siphoning about 300 million pesos from military funds, di ba?
But Garcia struck a deal. He agreed to return 135 million pesos to the government and plead guilty to lesser offenses. So instead na plunder, ang kaso niya naging money laundering and bribery. So again, pag plunder, talagang massive corruption, 'di ba? Pero nagkaroon ng agreement, so naging money laundering na lang and bribery yung case niya.
So this plea bargain eventually spared him from life imprisonment. After his 2018 trial, the court acquitted him of plunder, citing insufficient evidence and convicting him only of graft with a fine.
Now let's go naman sa napakasikat at talaga naman napakagaling magbudots na si Bong Revilla Jr. He has such an interesting story kasi he was arrested in 2014 for a 224.5 million peso pork barrel scheme. Initially, denied bail.
Pero noong 2018, 'di ba, the Sandigan Bayan actually acquitted him of plunder charges, and right after that, he posted just 480,000 pesos bail for related graft charges and walked completely free.
So again, 'di ba, 480,000 pesos for someone accused of stealing over 200 million. Talagang nakakainsulto at nakakagigil talaga tong mga tao mo to.
'Di ba? And I mean, even in cases where, there is a convicted plunderer, a lot of the times, hindi sila VIP, 'di ba? For instance, to be fair, there's Janet Lim Napoles. So she was the alleged mastermind, also known as Queen Pin, of the pork barrel scam. She was denied bail outright.
The 2018 plea for release was flatly rejected by the Supreme Court. So there's at least one case where bail was properly denied.
Pero, klaro naman yung pattern, di ba? Parang, if you're well-connected, if you have strong defense teams who know how to invoke technical rulings and humanitarian arguments, you have a much better chance at, not getting detained.
Yes. For ordinary people charged with serious crimes, walang bail, walang VIB treatment. But if you know the right people and the right lawyers, the rules seem to bend.
Which brings us to our second B, and that's Besties. Or more accurately, known as the patronage system, or padrino. Ganda ng word na yun, padrino.
Oo, no?
Diba? Rolls off the tongue.
Nakakawayawan siya. Padrino. Di ba?
Ano nga bang ibig sabihin ng padrino?
By law, public appointments and privileges are supposed to be merit-based. But in practice, family ties and friendships often determine who gets the breaks.
Ibig sabihin lang nun, if you have connections, then you're more likely to get away with things. Look at who's involved in these pork barrel cases. Jinggoy Estrada is the former president's son. Bong Revilla is the son of a veteran actor politician. And Juan Ponce Enrile is a long-time Senate leader. So long, in fact, that I think he's older than sliced bread, right?
Di ba?
Yeah, fact yun. He's older than sliced bread.
Talaga, nakakita nga ako ng picture, may kasamang dinosaur. Talaga naman. Fossil.
So, hindi to mga random na tao, ah.
Talagang mga may deep connections na talaga tong mga taong to. So, hindi sila basta-basta talagang, alam mo yun, hindi mo makakanti tong mga taong to.
Totoo yan. There's science of powerful political clans with very deep networks. And observers actually note that these networks exert a subtle but very effective pressure on prosecutors and judges. So, for example, Estrada's legal team successfully argued under the Arroyo Doctrine that he was merely a quote-unquote regular pork barrel user.
A 3-member Sandigan Bayan panel applied that argument in a 3-2 vote. That's how close these decisions can be.
Critics argue that this amounts to favoritism. A padrino with the right connections can sway a case's outcome, whether by influencing which court hears it or by pushing legal precedents that benefit allies. Alam mo kung ano naalala ko dito? Oh my gosh. Ang naalala ko dito is the whole nepo baby discourse.
Oo.
Like the padrino system for our, fellow Gen Z listeners out there, it's basically nepo baby discourse, guys. Parang if you have the right people on your side, you will most likely turn out on top.
Diba? Parang with the right people na pamilya mo, talagang may influence, ganyan. Talaga, uso na siya dati, di ba? Iba lang yung term, pero it happens talaga. So one columnist, Jose Montelibano, put it bluntly. He warned that lawyers with good connections seek out judges who will rule for favors and money, meaning decisions are unduly influenced by relationships.
In other words, judges can be for sale.
And it's not just columnists saying this. Academic studies have found that the courts are not exempt from the padrino system.
Justices are often appointed by the president through personal or political ties. It's never purely on merit. And once on the bench, these appointees can often remain very loyal to the president who appointed them.
Even to the point of ignoring that president's own abuses.
Another aspect of the besties or Nepo baby influence is the switching of officials handling cases.
In the Carlos Garcia case, acting ombudsman special prosecutor Wendell Barrera Sulit was investigated and dismissed for approving the plea deal we mentioned earlier.
So the Justice Department under the Aquino administration charged her with graft and betrayal of trust. A House panel even recommended that she get fired. That's insane, diba?
Of course, but she appealed to the Court of Appeals, but in 2020, her dismissal was upheld.
So in Bong Revilla's case, the lead prosecutor, Jefferson Toribio, was appointed by President Duterte as a local judge in PDT 17. He quietly left the ombudsman's team. We don't even know why.
Whether these personal changes or promotions or transfers, they often unsettle the prosecution's continuity. Cases lose momentum. Institutional knowledge disappears.
And, that's really the point, diba? Kasi parang, how are you going to win a case if you don't have people on the inside on your side? Diba?
Tapos parang alam mo yan, so sobrang parang nawawala yung mga tao, nalilipat sila sa mga ibang mga, like, naalis sila sa team ng prosecution team. Parang nawawala ng momentum kasi meron ng ibang tao na nag-handle ng case na to, ganyan. So parang alam mo yun, parang medyo, hindi naman exactly, pero parang nawawala ng gana na. Alam mo yun, parang kinakalimutan na siya ng tao. Parang ganon.
Parang importante pa rin naman siya, of course. Pero there is, at one point, going to be this sort of stagnancy na magiging pakiramdam mo na lang, saka, like, galaw nga siya ng galaw, like, hindi na natin ma-put down yung pinaka-resulta. So, like, why keep going?
Oo, parang, sabihin naman parang ang dami nangyayari, at the same time, walang nangyayari. Parang ganon.
So, now we're moving on to our third bait, and that's bribes. And this is where it gets even more complicated. So witness cooperation can actually shift dramatically in these cases, sometimes through intimidation, but sometimes through something more subtle, like, say, transactional immunity.
Take Merlina Suñas, a whistleblower in Rebellious trial. She was placed under witness protection and granted immunity to keep her out of jail.
But then she became what the court called a hostile witness. So the Sandigan Bayan allowed Revilla's lawyers to question her freely because her interest was tied to staying out of jail.
So a witness who once supported the prosecution ended up aiding the defense. That's witness tampering, but done legally through immunity deals.
Janet Lim Napoles herself was given witness protection in a related Malampaya fund case, which caused public outrage about a negotiated deal.
These episodes show how witness tampering can occur not just through intimidation, but through quid pro quo arrangements encouraged by the padrino culture.
So let's try to look at some real-life bribery convictions other than Janet Lim Napoles's. So, who are, a few of them?
Jinggoy Estrada was acquitted of plunder in January 2024, but he was convicted of bribery.
The court found that he took 1 million pesos directly from Napoles, plus millions more indirectly. But because of that Arroyo precedent, he was allowed bail.
He remained free on his 1.3 million peso bail bond while appealing. So even with a bribery conviction, he's not behind bars. Kita naman natin ngayon, di ba, na Senado pa.
Exactly.
And he was previously, pro tempore pa. 'Di ba? So parang nakakainis, no? Nakakainis dito siguro kasi merong sobrang complicated nung mga nangyayari. Nakalimutan ba ng mga tao at niluklok siya ulit? I mean, 'di
Yeah,
ba?
totoo, totoo. I feel like that is kind of the whole point of the whole 3B system is to eventually you get people, you get the public, you get the court so confused that they won't even really remember what the entire problem was about.
'Di ba? I mean, kahit kung sabihin natin na that's a decade, more than a decade ago, parang alam mo, itatatak yun eh.
Oo.
Nagnakaw siya ng ganun karami. 'Di ba?
Pero, sometimes that's just how the cookie crumbles. And that's definitely why we're teaching you guys how to get away with plunder. Because if you know how, then how will you forget? Diba? So, apart from Jinggoy Estrada, there was the one that we mentioned, that's Janet Lim Napoles. So she was convicted in 2024 of 5 counts, giving Estrada that 1 million peso bribe. So,
She was convicted of giving the bribe and he was convicted of taking it. But their outcomes, very different. Kita naman natin, 'di ba, who's behind bars and sino yung nasa labas,
Oo.
'di ba?
So the contrast is, it's really stark. And it shows that even admitted bribe giving can coincide with highly favorable legal outcomes if you're on the right side of the padrino system, however. So, do you want to recap what we learned today?
Of course.
Yeah.
Remember, 3 Bs. Bails, bribes, and besties. Courts routinely use technicalities to allow bail or acquit the well-connected. The Arroyo Doctrine for Estrada, humanitarian grounds for Enrile, insufficient evidence for Revilla.
Meanwhile, zealous prosecutors who threaten these deals, like Wendell Barrera Sulit, get sidelined or outright dismissed.
Witnesses flip from prosecution allies to defense assets through immunity deals that amount to legalized bribery.
And underlying all of it is the wide-spanning padrino system, a network of family ties, political connections, and favors that determines who gets breaks and who doesn't.
Investigators and journalists note that many big-time corruption cases in Asia hinge on the network behind the accused, not just the evidence.
In the Philippine context, that means bail decisions and trial results can turn on who you know, the very definition of the padrino system.
Plunder cases often end up revealing more about who is pulling the strings than about the crimes themselves.
It's a system where justice is negotiable, no? If you have the right connections.
So anong takeaway natin from all of this?
I mean, I think the Philippine justice system, at least when it comes to like high-profile corruption cases, tends to operate on 2 tracks. So there's one for the powerful, and there's one for the well-connected. Well, whoops. There's that's 2 tracks. One for the powerful and the well-connected, and one for the rest of us.
Plunder may be a non-bailable offense on paper, but in practice, the right lawyer, the right connections, and the right arguments can set you free.
In the next episode, we'll be looking at what happens after these cases, how convicted or acquitted officials can return to public life, and what that means for Philippine democracy.
Thank you for listening. Until next time, stay informed and stay critical.
This has been How to Get Away with Plunder. We're Nana and Rain. See you next episode.